Hello, Alistair Hill here. So this is part 2 of a series of videos of me explaining what I have shamelessly called the Alistair Hill, the Alistair Hill finger lock, and it's a bit of hypnotic phenomena that I came up with maybe 6 months ago now, and I started doing with a lot of different people, and I find it's pretty reliable. So I'm going to guide you through the different steps. If you haven't watched the first video, it's got 2 videos of me doing it in impromptu hypnosis settings, and then it's got me kind of guiding you through it as you watch. Please watch those videos first if you haven't. But for now, I'll just take you through the steps of it and my kind of thinking behind each step. And then at the end, I've got 1 or 2 more example videos of me doing it in impromptu settings for you to watch. Alright, so let's turn the page. The way I begin with all this, I see hypnosis as a series of yes sets. And what I mean by a yes set is, you know, a set of instructions or questions that people kind of agree to, and they can go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And they don't realise that as they go along these steps, they're kind of setting themselves up for, you know, an experience that they didn't realise was possible, or that they didn't realise they were going to go into. And along with that, I also see hypnosis as a series of tasks. It's not the only way I view hypnosis, but it's one way. And I see it as, you know, have they done task 1? Have they done task 2? Have they done task 3? Have they done task 4? And so long as people can tick off enough of these tasks, then it makes the end result much, much, much more likely. Often when bits of phenomena don't really work, I think the problem happened earlier in the chain, that they weren't kind of following your instructions to begin with, or they weren't quite in the right state of mind to begin with. Alright, so let's go through this. So the way it starts is I'll point at a person's right hand, or left hand, but it's usually the right hand, and I'll say, okay, can you lift up your right hand, and can you do this movement with your hand? This is kind of the beginning of a yes set. They're already agreeing, they're already lifting their hand up. You know, I'm already kind of, you know, defining stuff, really. Can you do this movement with your hand? And then I'll get agreement that it's easy. It's kind of easy movement, right? Yes, it's kind of simple thing. Get them to agree. One of the reasons for getting people to agree to this is because I like the contrast between them agreeing it's easy at the beginning, and then at the end, with them being unable to open it. So it kind of sets up the contrast. Step 2, I say make this shape, and this is the shape which, you know, in some countries is an insult, so bear that in mind. Make this shape and look at it. One thing about this shape, it's not a big thing, but opening your fingers like this, it's a slightly different thing than opening your fingers like this. There's, at least in my hand, there's a bit more tension when I'm making this shape compared to when I'm just doing this. People aren't going to pick up on that, but it's a slight physiological aspect to this, which likely adds a little bit, you know, to its efficacy. Obviously this isn't an impossible movement though, but I think it adds something very small. It's just, you know, slightly stacking the deck in your favour. So make this shape and look at it, right, you know, and I want absorption, I want people getting engaged, I want people, yeah, just there, like, in, you know. So I'm looking out for that. Step 3, as you're looking at it, so, you know, this is typical kind of pacing and leading type language. As you're looking at it, imagine a metal hoop or a solid metal ring. Metal hoop, metal ring, I think it's an easy thing to visualize. I think it's something, you know, that the imagination can easily latch onto. Let's say I was doing this shape here, and I said, okay, imagine like a kind of, I don't know how you describe that shape, but kind of an oval shaped piece of metal. Doesn't quite capture the imagination the same way. It's not as easy to visualize, it's not easy to kind of get involved in. Whereas a metal ring, we see metal rings and hoops all the time. They're everywhere, you know, like on the curtain above me there's metal hoops. I'm wearing a ring. you know, nuts and bolts, you know. There's metal rings, metal hoops all over the place. It's a very easy thing for people to imagine. So as you're looking at it, imagine a solid metal hoop or a solid metal ring. And then you want to check to see that they've actually imagined that. You know, people will often nod or do a little sound to let you know. But again, because I see things as a series of tasks, if they haven't done it, then we're already going off from where we need to be. They need to have imagined it and engaged their mind. Step 4, suggestion number 4. I like the suggestion. If you haven't already, imagine it merging with your fingers and thumb and hand. Okay, I really like this. If you haven't already, presuppose that it was supposed to happen or they were supposed to do it. And it does that kind of gently. So yeah, it's a nice smooth transition. And I put it in because when people imagined the solid metal hoop or solid metal ring, when they imagine it, sometimes people imagine it like in the middle, some people imagine it like around the outside, some people imagine it like in between their head and their hand. People will imagine it in all sorts of different places, right? Because our minds are just like that. We'll just respond in different ways. But you know, in my mind, what I want is for their hand, for this shape, to be solid metal in their mind. So it's no use it being kind of imagined in the middle. Well, it might be, but in my mind, I want them imagining the whole thing as a solid piece of metal, right? So if you haven't already, you know, kind of presuppose it was supposed to happen, and it kind of, in a kind of gentle way, gets them to imagine the whole thing as a piece of metal. Imagine it merging with your fingers and thumb and hand. So after this suggestion here, like the picture in my head should be quite similar to the picture in their head. And the picture in my head is this shape here is solid metal and their hand is likely also solid metal, but particularly this shape here is going to be solid metal. The ring is not going to be here or over here, it's going to be where we want it. Alright, next bit, another bit of pacing and leading. As you're imagining it, pacing statement, merging, imagine it becomes solid, completely solid locks. So now you're going to give your suggestions to create a strong sense of solidity. So you can riff around this, you'll see in the different videos, you know, I improvise around this idea. I don't say exactly the same thing every time, but you know, completely solid, it's solid, it locks. You know, immovable, fixed in place. Give these strong suggestions for this thing becoming solid. You know, click your fingers, sticks, locks, completely solid. Final step is getting onto the challenge stage. So through these 1 to 5 steps, we should get this really solid experience going on. And challenge phenomena is always like, do one thing and another thing at the same time. Like imagine it being stuck and locked and try opening it at the same time. Just do this one more, right? That's what all challenge phenomena is. So I say, as you hold this idea solidly in your mind right now, and you'll see there's a dual meaning to this. As you hold this solidly in your mind right now, as you hold this solidly in your attention right now. So there's a dual meaning of hold it in your mind and hold your hand solidly. So as you hold this idea solidly in your mind right now, simultaneously try and open your fingers. I mean, I'm so blatant here, right, of this do two things at the same time idea, just completely blatantly. You know, it's almost like me almost saying, you know, hold your arm down and try and pick it up at the same time. Right, I'm just blatantly saying that. Simultaneously put your arm down and up at the same time. You know, you can't do it, can you? So it's so blatant, right? But people will still be kind of astonished or surprised by it. So, and then after I've said this, I will kind of riff around it continuing to be stuck in a fairly kind of traditional, you know, kind of street hypnosis or or stage hypnosis kind of way, kind of direct hypnosis style, you know, the more you try and open it, the more it can become solid. You know, you can get curious about how solid it gets. Say all those kinds of things to amplify the solidity. All right, so I hope it's given you some sense of my thinking behind each step, and please play around with it, right? If you have a go with this in whatever setting, whatever context you do this kind of thing with people with, then let me know. I'd love to hear if you're, you know, suddenly sticking people's fingers together all over the place. I've taught this to a few different people, and they found it works great. They'll chuck it in the beginning of a hypnotherapy session. It can really, you know, demonstrate to someone, whoa, my imagination is really quite powerful, more powerful than I realized. And that's a great thing to do at the beginning. It will really get people sucked in to the rest of the session very often. You know, impromptu hypnosis, it's great. Even out of a hypnosis context, you can use it. I work for a charity called Rock to Recovery. I don't introduce myself as a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist, right? I'm working with veterans, and I might do this with veterans during a session to just as a thought experiment, I'll call it. Let's do a thought experiment. And again, the aim is just to show them, whoa, your imagination is powerful. It can do different things. So you don't need the hypnosis frame to start doing this kind of thing with people. Another thing, before I show you the last video clips of me doing this out in an impromptu hypnosis setting, is play around with this suggestion if you haven't already. I've started playing around with this. It's a pretty cool suggestion. I've started to find more places that I can use it. Here's a really obvious one. Let's say you're doing some relaxation with somebody. You could say, imagine breathing in relaxation. And if you haven't already, imagine it flowing down through your arms and legs. So you can use it in very kind of smooth ways to amplify and expand experiences in a nice sort of smooth way. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please like it. If you want to subscribe, we're going to be making more videos. If you want to leave a comment, please do. I'd love to hear any thoughts. So yeah, that's all. Enjoy the final video. There might be 2 videos actually I put on the end of this. So enjoy those final videos, and all the best. Goodbye. Your eyes fixed on them. Okay? As you look at it, I'd like you to imagine a solid metal ring, like a solid metal hoop. Okay? And if you haven't already, I'd like you to imagine that metal ring merging with your finger and your thumb and your hand. Just imagine what that metal merging with. Just imagine it becomes solid, like completely solid. Just imagine it becomes so solid it just becomes stuck, like it just locks, completely solid. And hold that in your mind. Hold that solidly in your attention and simultaneously try opening it. So just find it just locks and sticks tighter and tighter. Just find the more you try and open it, the more you just find your hand just gets tighter and tighter and just completely locks.
Don't get me wrong. I think she had her big on.
Right, and you can really try and just imagine that stuckness moves to your elbow. Imagine that metal moves to your elbow right now, and your elbow becomes locked and stuck. Then imagine that metal moves to your shoulder. Imagine your shoulder and your whole arm starts sticking and locking. And imagine that moves to your jaw. There you go. And imagine just like your name gets stuck on your tongue. Like your name is just stuck on your tongue. But you could try and say it, but it just sticks on your tongue. And what is it? Just gets completely stuck and locked. Just completely stuck and locked. And when I clap my hands, everything is going to melt away and it's going to return to normal. Oh my gosh. Hey Mum, so we're going to try doing this thing with you. Can you do this? This action? Right.
Right hand.
Left or right, doesn't matter. Cool. I'd like you to make a ring, like make a hoop with it. Mm-hmm. And just keep your eyes fixed on it. Mm-hmm. And as you're looking at it, I'd like you to imagine a solid metal hoop, like a solid metal ring. And if you haven't already, imagine that metal hoop, that metal ring merging with your fingers and your thumb and your hand.
Okay.
Imagine that metal hoop merging with your fingers and your thumb and your hand. And as you imagine it merging, imagine the whole thing becoming solid. Imagine the whole thing becoming completely solid. And just imagine it gets so solid that it just sticks. It just locks like one solid lump. And as you imagine that now becoming completely solid, hold that solidly in your mind, hold that solidly in your attention, and simultaneously try opening those fingers. Just hold it solidly in your mind, solidly in your attention, and simultaneously try opening those fingers. Right. What does that feel like?
Solid.
Right. And really just hold it solidly in your mind and just try opening and just find it just gets really solid. There you go. And then just let the images fade. And let your fingers begin to relax. There you go. And then just try opening it. Well, there we go. Very cool. Thank you for taking part in my little thought experiment.